Hi, this is Craig and welcome back to Cruising Off Duty. If you've been watching the channel, you know I took an Xquisite X5, a 50-foot catamaran, and sailed it from Cape Town, South Africa, across the equator, all the way to the Caribbean. It was an amazing adventure. In this episode, you're going to see us sailing away from that beautiful St Helena Island you saw in the last episode on a 12-day passage between here and what will end up being a Brazilian island called Fernando De Noronha. It is also breathtakingly beautiful. Lots of dolphins. I mean, more dolphins than you can count in the waters around this island in Brazil. You're definitely going to want to check that out. But in this episode, we get about halfway through that passage, and I do a halfway through the voyage update of things that we liked, things that we didn't like so much, and whatnot. So stay tuned for that. Before we go any further, I just want to give a special shout out to the patrons that support the channel, many of whom have been supporting this channel since long before I was doing these transatlantic sailing voyages. And then in this particular voyage, I had these sponsors jump on board to help defer the costs of me flying halfway around the world, only to get on a catamaran and sail almost halfway around the world, all while I had to leave my regular paying job. Thanks so much. I couldn't have done it without you, and hopefully you enjoy this episode.
We anchor and hoist the sail.
Okay, it is the 18th of June and we are just motoring away from St. Helena. Gotta say, it's a beautiful island, obviously visually breathtaking, coming out of the deep, deep ocean to be this volcanic island, but definitely enough to do. I'm just showing you all this stuff. But I don't know, it's kind of inconvenient to get to because you have to have a ferry bring you back and forth every time you want to do something. So that's definitely a detractor for the cruiser who wants to have freedom to just go into town, have dinner, stay out late, do whatever you want. You always have to factor in what time's the ferry close, because there's no other way to get to your boat. But other than that, we really like this island. So not a whole lot of wind, so we're probably going to motor for the first part, and if we get some wind, we're going to be going downwind. We'll bring out the screecher. So yeah, thumbs up to coming to St. Helena, but you might find you don't have the freedom that you would at other anchorages that you can go to. And with that, we left beautiful St. Helena Island on our way to what should have been the Caribbean. But remember at the beginning of this voyage when we got stuck in Cape Town for 10 extra days? Yeah, that's gonna come back to bite us now because Steve had a hard deadline. He had to get back to California by a certain date, and we realized we couldn't make it all the way from St. Helena all the way to the Caribbean. So we needed to make a stop in the middle. We had to divert off our regular course to Brazil. That was the best country we figured for him to fly home. At first we thought about dropping him in Natal, Brazil, which is on the mainland, but then eventually we thought, hey, let's go somewhere more picturesque. So we end up going to Fernando De Noronha, which is an island that's owned by Brazil. So more on that later. And just a little foreshadowing here, Steve ran out of time first and had to get off in Brazil. I had a little bit more time, so I got to make it all the way to Grenada in the Caribbean, so I did get to cross the equator, but unfortunately ran out of time as well. That's something you'll see in the future episode. But for this episode, you're going to see the 12 days of sailing it took to get all the way to Fernando de Noronha. I'm going to throw some dates on some footage just so you get that feeling of passage of time. Also interjected in the middle there will be some vlog footage where I'll talk to the camera or other crew will talk to the camera. So hopefully you enjoy it. Okay, welcome back to Cruising Off Duty. This is sort of our third day. We're starting our third day of sailing, leaving St. Helena Island in the middle of the South Atlantic, heading to Natal, Brazil. It's just one of those smaller towns on the upper northern corner of Brazil, kind of like on our way towards the Caribbean. We need to drop off Steve. He's got to get going home, so we had to make this kind of side path. We weren't originally planning to stop in Brazil. If you've been watching the episode since the beginning, that wasn't on the plan of attack. But we are definitely going to have to do that now because we are way behind schedule. Today, the start of the third day, we've got our spinnaker up and it's finally working. So we left St. Helena, super light winds. We left around 5 p.m. Again, later than we were thinking. And we motored pretty much that whole evening, overnight to the next day. Yesterday, we tried to put up our sails with limited success. It wasn't a lot of wind, so we weren't doing super speedy. We're hoping to get at least 6 knot average minimum per hour for 24 hours, so it's about 144 nautical miles per day. That's the minimum we want to do, preferably more, but yesterday was light winds and just too late for anything really, so we motored a little bit and sailed, motor sailed the rest. Today is the first day. We got no motor on. Spinnaker is up, enough wind to completely fill it. It's exciting to have the engine off, and yeah, so there we go. And it's finally kind of sunny. As you can see the clouds. Earlier it was cloudy. When it's cloudy out here, it gets kind of chilly. My watch is 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and I need to wear jeans and a sweatshirt, but now we're midday and the sun is out, so finally feeling tropic. Okay, it's the 21st of June, it is Friday. We are about third day of sailing since St Helena, and I just wanted to showcase that we are more than halfway across the South Atlantic on our way to Natal, Brazil, where we'll drop off Steve and get a new member of the crew. And we are just loving this parasailer. We just changed tack from a port tack to a starboard tack, and this thing is just so great when you got to go downwind. It doesn't make a lot of noise, doesn't slam around like the mainsail does, and the screecher. So this is getting us just as much over more speed and way less commotion on the boat. The boat has a much smoother motion when we have the spinnaker up, or in this case it's a parasailer. So we are super happy, enjoying it, having beautiful weather. Sunny with cloudy today, but we're finally getting warm enough that during the day we're all in shorts and t-shirts. At night, as you can see, it gets a little cooler still. Wearing a sweatshirt, but still very, very comfortable. No coat at least, so that's an upside. So yeah, that's it for today. Talk to you later. Okay, this is Saturday, the 22nd of June. We're having just an awesome passage, again with the non-stop spinnaker. Spinnaker sailing is awesome, so comfortable, straight downwind. Probably not the fastest point of sail, but so comfortable. And we are having just remarkable days. Sunny with slight clouds today. Couldn't get any better. Okay, welcome back. This is June 24th. I can't even remember how many days we've been sailing. I think we're in our 6th day of sailing since St Helena. We're more than halfway done the sailing that I'll be able to do on this passage. So I just wanted to go through a bit of the highlights, some of the places we've been, some of the places I would highly suggest you go if you're sort of following the same track across the South Atlantic. And yeah, just my overall thoughts as we are more than halfway done. Now, when we started this voyage, we had intentions of going Cape Town to Namibia, Namibia to St Helena to Ascension Island, then Ascension Island, one big jump to the Caribbean. Obviously, if you've been watching previous episodes, things had to change because we got away 10 days late from Cape Town, which really put a crimp on things because Steve in particular had a hard deadline he couldn't go past. So he had prearranged that if we run out of time, we'll stop in Brazil and he'll get off and fly home from there. I have a bit of a time crunch as well, so that 10 days of extra delay at the beginning kind of foobarred the original plans of me going all the way to, let's say, Florida or definitely the east coast of the United States. So here's the new plan. Obviously, we did the first normal thing from Cape Town to Namibia, Namibia to St Helena. That was the same as we always planned, but because of the crunch, we skipped Ascension Island. We're already past it, and we're heading to Brazil. Originally, we were thinking of Natal, Brazil, which is on the mainland of Brazil, but subsequently discussions were had, and we thought it would be more beautiful to go to an island. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. I'll put it in the video, like at the bottom of the screen right now. It's Fernando De something, a Brazilian island. So that should be pretty interesting. Steve will get off there. We're supposed to get a paid captain to jump on board to give us that extra experience for the last bit from that island in Brazil all the way to the Caribbean. We're thinking it would be Barbados would be our first landfall in the Caribbean, at which point I've run out of time and I will have to fly home myself. In case you see sometimes sun and sometimes shade, I am right now behind the spinnaker, or the parasailer in this case. And that's the way we've been sailing for pretty much the past 5 days. It's super enjoyable. It's not the fastest wind angle going straight downwind because of course the apparent wind dies the faster you go. But we've been making great time because there's been a ton of wind on this passage, which is great. So we've been averaging about 7 knots for the whole passage. We've had a high speed of 17.5 knots. Now granted, that was surfing down a wave, but we've had times where we've had consistently 11-ish, 12 knots for, you know, a period of time. And then when you surf down a wave, you of course get that extra little boost. So that's been pretty cool. So we've been making good time. So let's go back to the beginning. Cape Town is definitely a must stop. If you're thinking of doing the circumnavigation, following the trade wind route around the world, Cape Town would be your best option if you don't want to go through the Suez Canal. That's the way Janice and I are going to do it. We have no intention of going through Pirate Alley and the Suez Canal past Somalia and all that stuff. That's just way too crazy and dangerous. So we will do the around South Africa route to get around the world. And I highly suggest you stop in Cape Town for a number of reasons. Let's go through them. A, we were at the V&A waterfront. There's actually 2 kind of big marinas, but the V&A waterfront, probably a little bit more money, but is so perfectly situated. It's right in the heart of a bunch of restaurants, bars, activities, nightlife. Just a hoot to be there, and also super, super safe. I'm sure there's lots of footage I've already shown. I'll throw some on now of that area. There's a big Ferris wheel and things, but there's a lot of visible security. V&A waterfront security is what they're called. They're wearing like blue uniforms, and they're everywhere. They're like, seriously, there's dozens of them walking around. So you feel very secure that you're not going to have anything untoward happen to you while you're in Cape Town, especially that part of Cape Town. Now, we did leave that area, that really super safe area of Cape Town, and went on a bit of a, we were looking for charts and I needed to get one of my cameras fixed, and we went walking into kind of more traditional business district of Cape Town, and it definitely got a little more sketchy there. There was definitely one guy who was trying to pickpocket off of Sean. He was walking and trying to beg for money, and we kept saying no and kept walking, and he kept bumping into Sean and getting too close to his personal space. And later Sean found one of his pockets had been slit open, and he was pretty sure this guy was trying to pickpocket him. So like I say, there is definitely some, as you get away from the V&A waterfront, it's definitely a little more sketchy. Now, we've met plenty of people from South Africa in Namibia and other places, and even I had some comments from you guys in the viewer comments before we left saying, watch yourself in South Africa, it can be very, very dangerous. And we did get some confirmation of that, of people who lived in South Africa, and they said, yeah, it can be kind of dangerous, especially, not so much in Cape Town. They said that's the best city to go to, but Johannesburg, a big city in South Africa, is definitely way, way more sketchy. In fact, he said if I walked around with my gimbal and my expensive camera in Johannesburg, I would most definitely get mugged, especially if I was alone. So he said, yeah, Cape Town's the best bet. So there you go. Some of my viewers were right. There is some areas you got to watch out for, but Cape Town, especially near the waterfront, is super modern. Malls, bars, restaurants, lots of security. You can feel great stopping there. So highly suggest you stop in Cape Town and check that area out. Next was Namibia, Walvis Bay. Now, I wasn't really a fan of Walvis Bay Harbor because it was kind of industrial, not that pretty, but actually in learning more about it, that's the only big harbor. And a lot of the things that you can go to, like the dune tour we did and other things, were the only harbor you can get that's closest to all that is Walvis Bay. So if you're going to stop in Namibia, that is your best bet. There is another harbor further south. It's much smaller and it's not nearly as close to some of the attractions and tours you can go on. So Walvis Bay is your best bet. So yeah, stop there if you're interested in going to Namibia, or if you want to shorten your passage from Cape Town to St Helena, have a stop in the middle, then you want to stop in Namibia. It's very safe. We love that area for safety. We walked around all the time, never felt any no panhandlers, nobody begging for money, nobody giving you any kind of like that sketchy look. So we felt super safe there, and I would definitely say that's a spot to stop if you need to reprovision or get fuel or anything. That area, you could use your credit card everywhere. All the restaurants, all the bars, the grocery stores, all took credit cards, no problem. Which didn't happen at our next stop, surprisingly, because our next stop was St Helena. Spinnaker's bouncing around a bit here. St Helena was our next stop, and it is actually a island, a protectorate of Britain. So I suspected it would be super modern. There would be, you know, normal credit cards accepted everywhere and whatnot. It is by far one of the prettiest islands and one of the least traveled to islands, being that it's in the middle of the South Atlantic. So I highly suggest you go. But a couple of things you need to know. show up with a ton of cash, because nobody accepts credit cards there. Nowhere did we see a spot that said we take MasterCard, Visa, all that stuff, not even the grocery stores. So what you have to do when you get there is go into a bank and trade over your, they deal with pounds. So you have to change your American money or your Canadian money or whatever money you have into pounds, but not the normal British pounds. They're the St Helena pounds, which are pegged to the British pound. But when you go to a bank and get it exchanged, you're not going to get British pounds, you're going to get St Helena money, which is kind of a pain if you take too much out, because then you'd have to go back to the bank and exchange it back into whatever currency you want before you leave, because you're not going to be able to use St Helena money anywhere else but on St Helena. Like I've mentioned in a previous episode, so much to see and do there, so beautiful, so clean, the people were so friendly, it was great, nothing sketchy about it at all. Highly suggest you go. But be advised, you're going to have to pay fees to stay there. You can't anchor, you've got to be on a mooring ball. It wasn't very expensive for the mooring ball, but what was a bit of an inconvenience was there's only one way to get off your boat to land, and that's to take a ferry. And the ferry, you have to call the ferry on the radio, the VHF radio, and book your time. It's usually once an hour. They go through and pick people up from boats and go to shore. And the same thing when you want to go back to your boat, you have to go to the dock and wait for the ferry to pick you up and take you back to the boat. They keep track of how many times you've done a round trip and how many people. And then at the end of the time you're there, you have to pay the ferryman for all those passages back and forth. So you can't come and go as you please. The ferry closes at 6, maybe 7 p.m. at night, so you can't stay out late and go to the bars. And there's no way to get around it. There's nowhere to beach your dinghy or your tender on the shore. It's all rocks and jaggedness, and yeah, just nowhere you're going to be able to put your tender. So just get used to that idea. You are going to have to use a ferry, and other than that, that's the only downside. St. Helena is beautiful. So that is the last stop we went at. We should have stopped at Ascension Island. I was told by some viewers it's actually just not that much to do on Ascension Island anyway, so I'm not super heartbroken we had to skip it. But the next island will be that Brazilian island, and I'm sure it's supposed to be quite beautiful, so there you go. So, other than that, the sailing has been spectacular. We've been mostly under the spinnaker that's behind the camera for the last 5 days, non-stop, day and night. We do kind of keep an eye on squalls and things like that, because you do not want to have a big spinnaker up if a squall is catching up behind you, because you could go from 15-20 knots of wind to 40 knots of wind, and that'll definitely blow your spinnaker out. So, you know, it's super comfortable. It's great if you need to go straight downwind with a spinnaker, but it's a very thin sail, so you got to be extra cautious to not accidentally get caught in a windstorm, which a normal mainsail or a screecher or a Genoa can handle that big gust of wind. You know, you might just have to, you know, turn downwind to decrease the apparent wind, but you're probably not going to blow out your sails. A spinnaker you can blow out, so you got to be extra cautious, but it is definitely the fastest way to go downwind. Now the one we have here is a parasailer. It's not as traditional asymmetrical spinnaker. It's a parasailer, so it's symmetrical. The good thing is it holds its shape really nice because it lets the extra wind through those vents. The downside is it's originally supposed to have 4 lines. We ended up figuring out you can do it with just 2 lines, like a symmetrical spinnaker or an asymmetrical spinnaker. The other thing about this one is Sean bought it secondhand, and it's actually slightly too small for this boat. You can see it's quite high off the deck. You can see there's definitely room for this to come down a little lower and also to be a little wider. This is a 55-foot catamaran and weighs about 56,000 pounds when fully loaded with fuel and water like we are now. So it's a heavy boat to be pushing with an Essence 1 sail, so you probably want something a little bit bigger than what we have, but we've still been making excellent time. So there you go. That is my update with more than half the way through this passage. Oh, another thing I wanted to mention. When I first started this, I told you I was going to try and give you kind of like a daily log of how I'm feeling the passage has been going. 2 reasons I haven't done that. A, where you sit in the nav station just back here, you can kind of see the little cockpit area up there. Steve actually sleeps right behind that, and when Tomas was on the boat before in Namibia, he was sleeping behind that. So while you're on your watch, you really can't whip out a camera like this and start talking. That's why I've moved to the bow of the boat, because if you're back there, you're probably disturbing somebody who's trying to have a nap. Steve is presently off watch and he's napping. So yeah, kind of restricted me in my ability to just whip a camera out and talk to you all the time. The second reason why I haven't been doing kind of like a daily log is it's like Groundhog Day. Every day of sailing looks exactly like the day before it. It's been downwind sailing. It's usually sunny with cloudy periods. Actually, there's almost no clouds today. But as you can see, there hasn't been a whole lot of drama to talk about. In fact, being in the middle of the ocean, there's not even a lot of wildlife. I haven't seen a bird in days, and we haven't seen any dolphins or any other kind of wildlife, because in your middle of the ocean, it's about, I don't know how many thousand feet deep here, and dolphins probably stay closer to land where the water's a little shallower, because they want to go fishing, but they have to come to the surface to breathe, of course. So being in the middle of the ocean where there's thousands of feet down, probably the fish are far and few between, and a lot of the wildlife is a lot further than a dolphin wants to dive down and try and find. So it's not probably a very prevalent area for dolphins. Maybe whales as they're traveling from A to B, but we only saw a whale way back near Namibia. We haven't seen a whale since then. So not a lot to talk about. Also, no freighters or big fishing boats to dodge. We've only seen 2 freighters in the whole time we've been in the ocean, and both of them we saw on AIS, so we knew they were there, but if we hadn't seen them on AIS, they might have just gone by and we wouldn't have even seen them. So it is sort of like being in the middle of a desert. You look around and there's nothing to see, just water as far as the eye can see, day after day after day, and no sail changes, no drama, no wildlife, so not much to talk about. So therefore, doing the daily vlog thing wasn't really going to be that interesting anyway, so you haven't missed out on much. But that's it. That's the update for more than halfway through the passage. I'll let you know if anything exciting happens. Until then, this is Craig signing off, wishing you safe cruising. Well, stay tuned for the next episode where we'll do the second half of this passage to Fernando De Noronha. And in this one, we finally have to take down this parasailer after like 6 days of sailing on it, because we got to start dodging squalls. Yeah, we finally have some drama, which will make us do some sail changes, gives us some things to talk about. In fact, I kind of like the squally environment. Anyways, you'll get that in the next episode, along with a lot more wind and a lot more speed as we make our way to Fernando. You're going to love that island too, so stay tuned. Also, make sure you always watch to the end of the episode, because I always throw an outtake or two at the end, something goofy that happened that was just kind of funny and didn't seem to have a place anywhere else in the video, so hopefully you enjoy that. If you enjoyed this episode and you like the recap of halfway through our transatlantic voyage, give it a thumbs up, it really helps out the channel. Subscribe so you don't miss any of the future episodes. And until next time, this is Craig signing off, wishing you safe cruising.
This is a very, very important message for the cruising community. You're probably wondering how, with a fruit bowl like this, which is full of salty, dangerous, cholesterol-inducing snacks, how 4 guys have been able to live such a healthy lifestyle for so many days at sea. And the answer is, in fact, in this perfectly normal 5-litre fruit bowl. Here at the bottom of the fruit bowl this is our fruit. So this is purchased from a supermarket. It's used in its fully made up capacity. This basically bulks up to 6 litres of fruit.
Of electrolyte rejuvenating water.
The fantastic thing about it is it's impossible for it to rot, go off, it doesn't need refrigeration, and it's left the fruit bowl available for this other product.
More important products.
It's just fantastic, really.
How have we ever survived?
That's our tip for this week. How to survive longer at sea.
There we go. Anything you got to say for yourself?
I think Neil said it all.